Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the really complex world of MRI scans. We're going to talk about the one fundamental challenge that every single technologist has to deal with, and that's this constant, delicate balancing act between getting that perfect image and getting it fast.
Okay, so here's what we've got on tap. We'll kick things off with the big problem, then we'll meet the big three factors at play. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty, the actual control knobs. I'll even give you a quick cheat sheet to take with you. And we'll wrap up by talking about why this whole thing is really more of an art form.
All right, first up, let's get right to the core conflict. At the very heart of every single MRI scan, there's this tension. It's this quest for something that honestly might just be impossible.
Think about it. Everybody involved, the patient in the scanner, the doctor waiting for the results, they all want the exact same thing, right? They want an image that is crystal clear, super detailed, and done in a flash. But, and this is the big question, can you actually get all of that at once?
And this really lays it all out. On one hand, you've got the dream. Max out the image quality, what we call the signal-to-noise ratio, or SNR, and get every tiny bit of detail, which is resolution. But then, there's reality. And reality says every second counts, so you've got to make that scan time as short as possible. And here's the kicker. These two goals are basically fighting each other.
So the big takeaway here, you can't have it all. You're always forced to make a choice. If you crank one of these things up, something else has to come down. It's just a constant negotiation, a real trade-off.
Okay, so let's get to know the three key players in this whole balancing act a little better. Let's really define what we mean by SNR, resolution, and scan time.
First up, we've got SNR, signal-to-noise ratio. This is basically all about how clean the image is. A high SNR gives you that beautiful, smooth picture you're looking for. But a low SNR, that's when you get a grainy, kind of staticky image that's just tough to make anything out of.
Next on the list is spatial resolution. This is all about detail. How sharp is the image? With high resolution, you can see all the tiny little structures with perfect focus. Low resolution, on the other hand, just makes everything look kind of blurry, or even blocky.
And last but not least, we have the one that's super straightforward but often the biggest headache, scan time. It's exactly what it sounds like. How long does the patient have to lie perfectly still in that scanner? And you always want this to be as short as humanly possible, for patient comfort and to keep them from moving and blurring the picture.
Okay, now this is really cool. What you're looking at here is basically the technologist's Bible. It's their map, their cheat sheet. See, each row is a different setting they can tweak, and the columns show exactly what happens when they do, how it's going to affect the image clarity, the detail, and of course, the total scan time.
So let's actually zoom in on a few of those. We're going to look at the specific control knobs that technologists can turn on the MRI machine and see the real-world consequences of every little adjustment.
First, let's talk about TR, which stands for repetition time. This is a really fundamental timing parameter. Basically, it controls how long the scanner waits between sending out each of its data-gathering pulses.
And this table shows a really simple direct trade-off. If you crank up the TR, you're giving the tissue more time to recover its signal. And what does that do? It gives you a much cleaner, higher SNR image. But there's always a but, right? The price you pay is pretty obvious. A longer wait between pulses means a longer total scan time. Simple as that. All right, next up, phase steps. An easy way to think about these is like the number of horizontal lines the scanner draws to build the picture. The more lines you draw, the more detail you get.
Now here's where it gets a little more complex. This is a classic trade-off. Yeah, increasing those phase steps gives you that amazing super sharp detail you're after, but look at the cost. Because each little pixel gets smaller, it can't capture as much signal. So the image gets noisier. And of course, collecting all those extra lines, yep, that takes more time too.
Okay, let's talk about NEX. That stands for number of excitations. What this is, essentially, is telling the scanner, hey, measure that exact same line again, and maybe again. Then it just averages all those results together.
So the key thing with NEX is that it's a super direct way to get a cleaner image. By averaging things out, you can cancel out a lot of that random staticky noise. But it's kind of a brute force method. Think about it. If you double the NEX, say from 1 to 2, you get a cleaner image, for sure, but you also literally double your scan time. It's a one-for-one trade.
Whew. Okay, that was a lot of technical detail, I know. So let's zoom back out for a second and just boil this all down into some easy, memorable shortcuts. Think of this as your quick and dirty cheat sheet for MRI trade-offs. So let's say your number one goal is a clean, noise-free image. What do? Well, these are your main go-tos. You can increase the TR, make the image slices a bit thicker, or just bump up the necks and repeat the measurement. Any of these will boost your signal. But you gotta remember, each one usually costs you somewhere else, either in time or in fine detail.
Now, what if you need to see the absolute finest details? You need that razor-sharp image. In that case, you're mostly going to be increasing the number of data lines you collect, like those phase steps we talked about. But you already know the deal, right? You have to be ready for the consequence, which is probably going to be a drop in your SNR, making that beautiful image a little more grainy. And finally, what if speed is the name of the game? You just have to get it done fast. Well, these are the three main knobs you're going to turn down. You'll drop the TR, collect fewer lines of data, and definitely keep the NX at 1. You're basically saying, I'll accept the compromises in signal and detail, just get this scan done quickly.
And all of this brings us to our final big picture idea here. Once you understand these trade-offs, you start to see that an MRI scan, well, it's a lot more than just pushing a button on a fancy machine.
When you get right down to it, it all comes back to this one, single, inescapable rule. You can almost think of it as the fundamental law of MRI. If you try to improve one corner of that triangle, whether it's signal, detail, or time, you are always going to pay for it somewhere else. There is just no free lunch.
So that leaves us with this final thought to chew on. For every single patient, for every different medical question, the technologist has to weigh all these competing demands and somehow find that perfect balance point. So are they just running a machine, or are they really an artist, mastering this incredibly subtle art of the perfect compromise?